It's the worst violence Northern Ireland has seen in years. Pro-British loyalists have been rioting every day for a week, angry about post-Brexit issues. But more than 20 years since the Good Friday Agreement, is peace at risk in Northern Ireland? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Hashim Ahal-Barra. The 1998 Good Friday Agreement brought peace to Northern Ireland, but the issues that divided the region haven't gone away. And now, in the aftermath of the UK's departure from the EU, the situation has got worse and threatens to derail that agreement. Pro-British loyalists say the post-Brexit trade agreements threaten Northern Ireland's place in the UK, while Irish nationalists accuse them of using the issue to stoke trouble. Dozens of police officers have been hurt in a week of riots, prompting regional and international governments to appeal for calm. It's a complicated issue that we'll break down with our guests shortly. First, this report from Andrew Simmons in Belfast.
The situation is tense, nothing like it has been on Wednesday and Thursday night at this stage, but this can build. The Loyalists saying that they want to have a calm out of respect, but this problem still persists. There is a whole round of speculation about some sort of suspension, but they're ignoring calls from the Assembly, the Northern Ireland Assembly, to stop this whole protest movement, and they're saying there can't be any peace right now because of Brexit, because of the situation they're in over imports, exports, the whole bureaucracy of importing goods from Britain, and this place being really a part of the European Union now with the border in the Irish Sea. So the Brexit is meant to be the central issue, but there are other complications, like always in Northern Ireland. There's more behind the story. There's a situation where a funeral a year ago took place. A prominent IRA member, Bobby Storey, and at that funeral, something like 2,000 Sinn Féin supporters gathered. And at the end of it all, the unionists said this was in breach of COVID regulations, and prosecutions should have been made across the board, particularly at the senior Sinn Féin leadership there. That didn't take place. Arlene Foster has now called for the resignation of the Chief Constable, and that has not. As you can see, everyone's reliant on the security forces, but right now they're under fire from the politicians themselves. So it's by no means a secure situation here.
Let's take a closer look at the rift between the Protestant loyalists who want to remain part of the UK and the Catholic nationalists who want to unite with Ireland. The latest violence has drawn comparisons to the Troubles, the three-decade conflict between the two sides that killed at least 3,600 people. The conflict ended in 1998 when a power-sharing government was set up under the so-called Good Friday Agreement. But there have been occasional attacks on security forces and sectarian street violence. And the Belfast administration collapsed in 2017 and remained suspended for more than 2 years. It resumed work at the start of 2020, but deep mistrust remains on both sides about cultural and political issues, including the status of the Irish language. Let's bring in our guests now. In Belfast, Julianne Corr-Johnston, a political commentator and former Belfast City Councillor. In Dublin, Donncha O'Bachan, professor at the School of Law and Government at the Dublin City University. He's also the author of From Partition to Brexit, the Irish Government and Northern Ireland. Also in Belfast, Brian Finney, political columnist for the Irish News and former Social Democratic Labour Party politician. Welcome to the programme. Julie, is it fair to describe what is happening in Northern Ireland as an expression of anger by the loyalists disenfranchised with the Brexit trading arrangements?
Yes, I would say that that's fair, and it's based on a culmination of issues that have led to today's events. I would say that those orchestrating violence or participating in violence are within a minority. That violence isn't representative at all of the community's aspirations or the direction of travel in which it wishes to take to protest decisions that have been made recently. However, that's not to be confused with contentment, because there isn't contentment. People are angry. They're angry at the British government. They're angry at the DUP. They're angry at the Irish government, and they're angry at the PPS.
Donncha, it all started in Derry, Carrickfergus and Newton Abbey, and it starts to spreading. But those areas are predominantly loyalists. So what's the message people are trying to convey to the establishment?
Well, that's difficult because it's not been necessarily articulated by political representatives of people on the ground. I think people on the ground have been perhaps emboldened by some statements that have been made in recent times by, in particular, the Democratic Unionist Party. But I think it's a good point maybe to take a step back and reflect on the fact that today, of all days, is the anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, and it's 23 years now since that seminal agreement was signed. And the Good Friday Agreement was it was an exercise in conflict management, not conflict resolution. The conflict is not resolved, and it's, in many ways, it institutionalized the conflict. And in that sense, the guns have been decommissioned, but the mindsets that led to the conflict in the first place have not been fully put aside, and people still live separate lives in Northern Ireland. They read separate newspapers, they go to separate schools, they live in separate neighbourhoods, and there's still a very zero-sum, winner-takes-all approach to politics in Northern Ireland. So what you have found is that, particularly since Brexit, that the constitutional issue has come back into focus, and there is this sense, certainly now among loyalists, that the way that Brexit has panned out, and remember, it was the Democratic Unionist Party which advocated Brexit against the wishes of the majority of people in Northern Ireland, but the way it has panned out has not been to the advantage of the unionist/loyalist community, and that is at the heart of a lot of what's going on right now.
Brian, could it be poor economy combined with Brexit aftermath, along with the COVID-19 impact on societies? You add to that what Donncha was talking about, particularly that this has not been a resolved conflict itself, and suddenly you have what is happening on the streets.
Yes, there are a lot of factors, and I think Julie is correct at the outset when she's saying the sort of rioting and disturbances that we've seen are not reflective of what political representatives want to do. Most of the people out causing disturbance, rioting, are teenagers. Last night, 3 of them were arrested, were 14 years old. And they certainly would not be aware of the complexities of sanitary checks at the ports or seed potatoes coming in. For a lot of the kids who are out there, this what they call here sometimes recreational rioting. All the youth clubs are closed. Everything's in lockdown. There is a direct correlation between where the rioting is taking place, and it is very localized in the places you mentioned earlier. There is a direct correlation between those areas and a lot of poverty, unemployment. Everything's been made worse by the pandemic. And some of these children are actually being used by more sinister forces. The police have concluded that there aren't organized paramilitaries behind this, but there are criminal gangs, and some of whose drug dealing has been disrupted, curiously enough, by the checks at the ports. They can no longer get wholesale supplies from Glasgow and Liverpool. And they're also unable to launder the money they've got from drugs because all the businesses are in lockdown and there's nothing that they can do to transact this. So some of the rioting began actually as a protest against the police being very successful in arresting a large number of paramilitaries near Newton Abbey.
And this is the thing, and let me go to Julie. You have on one hand those who would tell you that because the police has been successfully carrying out those crackdowns on gangsters operating in different parts of Northern Ireland, that you have this events happening. On the other hand, people would tell you, no, the unionists, the reason why they are on this risk is because they don't want to see the Irish Sea border issue shaping their future.
Well, I mean, what Brian has said, I've heard myself largely from commentators, but not from within the community. From within the community, there is a growing discontent, and has been for some time now, with the Democratic Unionist Party and its leadership or lack of. There's a feeling that the party has cozied up to those that have betrayed Northern Ireland or betrayed Northern Ireland in the past by giving effectively the European Union a role in Northern Ireland's governance, or influencing the style of governance so far as trade and relationships go. Does it relate to socioeconomic issues? I mean, socioeconomic issues within Northern Ireland aren't just green and orange, but I think that the feeling, I mean, I can only argue from a PUL perspective, but the feeling is that these parties have continued to practice the politics of encouraging people to doff their cap to those who are better off socially, better off financially, and better educated. And unfortunately, that has led these communities to the margins of society and experiencing the same oppression and marginalisation as what our terrible history in this place would say with regards to the treatment of other citizens. To be honest, it is largely, in my view, it's largely about the protocol. However, the catalyst for it, what broke the camel's back, so to speak, was the not the actual Bobby Story funeral. Of course, there was outrage at that time that wasn't green and orange, that was across Northern Ireland. There's people that obviously not been able to give their loved ones the send-off that they deserved. They watched them die through windows or through FaceTime. And weren't able to give those loved ones the send-off that they deserved. And obviously, I'm not sure what the healing or the grieving process is for your viewers, but for us here in Northern Ireland, we bring the body home the following day after the person has passed, and we spend a period of 3 days, with family and friends talking about it, and that's our healing and grieving process. But the PPS decision on the back of that was not to have any prosecutions. Now, there's this historical perception in Northern Ireland that there is a two-tier policing system and two-tier justice system towards the Loyalist and Unionist community. That's an allegation. And some will argue that it's true. Others will argue that it's not true. However, whenever these instances happen, it adds to that perception.
Donncha, that same complaint expressed by many unionists about, for example, the funeral of the Sinn Féin, of the IRA intelligence chief, Bobby Story. People said that the government should have put into place restrictions and those who attended should have been held accountable. It just left this impression among the people that the government is more in favour, or the institutions more in favour of the nationalists, not the loyalists.
Well, that was reflected, I guess, in a tweet that Arlene Foster put out, essentially while condemning the violence, saying that it was taking the focus off the real lawbreakers in Sinn Féin. And of course, she also argued that the Chief Constable of the Police Service of Northern Ireland should resign because Sinn Féin politicians who attended this funeral would not be prosecuted. But that, I think, is a very dangerous road to go down because, again, there's been an over-politicisation of the police in the past. And it's interesting that it's now coming from unionists, in fact, that are arguing that the police, should be more or less, arresting people at their behest. We've now a much more inclusive policing board and a more democratic way of governing the police. But I don't think it's there for political parties to be saying who should be arrested and who should not. That's a matter for the police. But I think that's getting away from the root causes here, because the root causes, I think, are built in people's insecurities, which haven't gone away and which have been accentuated by Brexit. There will be triggers, and things like the Bobby Story funeral and the lack of prosecutions and things like that bring these things to the fore. But I think it's the underground factors, the underlying factors, which are really the ones that we should examine. I think, viewers outside of Northern Ireland, these are very familiar micro issues to people living in Ireland and Northern Ireland. But I think to outside viewers, I think the key thing to take away is that, in terms of the two communities, there's been a shift Indeed, it was described as a tectonic shift by the then Taoiseach Leo Varadkar in Northern Ireland in terms of electoral politics as well. And that has, again, because of Brexit, reignited debates about the constitutional future of Northern Ireland. And I think that's at the heart of a lot of what's going on as well.
Brian, should we blame the idea of a harder Brexit combined with a soft Irish border with some of the confusion that is creating on the ground in Northern Ireland? Because this whole thing about the Irish sea border is widely interpreted in different ways by both key players in Northern Ireland.
Well, it is, and I mean, there's an absentee in this discussion, and that's the British government. And it was the British government who promised there would never be any kind of border in the Irish Sea, and Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, explicitly promised that that would never happen. And weeks after he became Prime Minister, that is exactly what he did. The other aspect about this is the British government is not properly operating the protocol. They are going slow. They are not cooperating with the European Union. They have been months behind in producing the sort of evidence that they should produce, so the committees who are responsible for mitigating the protocol's impact haven't even met in some cases, or when they do meet, they come to no decision, because the British government actually wasn't ready to leave on the 1st of January. They hadn't got the position in the customs positions in place at the ports here. And there was an initial period of 2 or 3 weeks where there were shortages in supermarkets and so on. So the role of the British government, some of whose members do not want to operate the protocol, and in many ways are behaving as if they're using Northern Ireland as sort of a bargaining chip to put pressure on the European Union and get more concessions out of the European Union. The role of the British government here has been very bad indeed in provoking the trouble on the streets and the disaffection among the unionist community.
Julie, the peace wall now has become the focal point of the clashes happening on a daily basis in Northern Ireland. Could it be an indication that the country is starting to slip slowly towards further violence? Do you have any concerns that the hope of peace could be shattered by what is happening now?
Well, I call myself the peace baby generation. I was born in 1987, so I was 10 years of age when the agreement was signed. So I was unable to vote and wouldn't have had any knowledge at all of what it was about. But as I've grown older, I've come to appreciate and thank those wiser heads across all sections of society that pulled the Good Friday Agreement and has saved and sheltered me from experiencing the same torturous and terrible times that those before me experienced in Northern Ireland, our dark history and dark past. As a mother to 2 3-year-old twins, or 3-year-old twins, I'm terrified at the prospect of us slipping back into something that, you know, as I say, I was sheltered from, but that my parents and my grandparents experienced and went through. I've never seen violence within the unionist community in my lifetime as much as I did this week. And it's terrifying to have seen the extent to which there was damage caused within a community, the harm that had been caused, pulling people off, the traumatizing of people, pulling them off a bus to set it on fire, bus driver pulled out of his job, made to depart from the vehicle so that it could be set on fire, a rolling bus that was on fire, a journalist doing his job that was attacked. And these are by members of my own community. But what I will say, and the one thing that keeps me really encouraged at this point in time, is using that area of North Belfast, Larnac Way, the infamous peace wall. That particular area has a population of 18,000. Only 500 or thereabouts were out on the streets, so there were 17,500 people at home, and that gives me comfort. I'm
sure that concern is shared by many in Northern Ireland who don't want to see a return whatsoever to those somber days of the 3 decades of a conflict. Donncha, one of the key issues enshrined in the power sharing agreement is the open borders between Ireland and Northern Ireland. Could this be one of the issues that are triggering some of the anxiety, particularly among the unionists who see this and as paving the way for them to further lose the whole identity of Northern Ireland?
No, an open border between both parts of Ireland, I don't think that was an issue. Indeed, unionist representatives expressed a desire to see the borders kept open. The problem is that was very difficult to reconcile with the type of Brexit that was chosen by the DUP and their allies in the British Conservative Party. And the DUP had 2.5 years of essentially power without responsibility. They were in government essentially with the Tory government when Brexit was being chosen, and all sorts of options were put forward, which could have brought about a Brexit that would have been softer, which would have meant less chaos, and a very hard Brexit was chosen. So essentially, we're going to have Northern Ireland either having a border on the island of Ireland or somehow a trade border along the Irish Sea. And it was the British Conservative government which negotiated an agreement which has brought us to this present impasse. So certainly people in that were advocating Brexit have a responsibility to own the Brexit that has come about, because the majority of people in Ireland did not want Brexit to happen, and in a sense are collateral damage for what's occurring as a result of this seminal decision.
All right, Brian, the March letter of the representatives of the Loyalist Local Communities Council about withdrawing support for the Good Friday Agreement, should it be taken seriously by people in Northern Ireland?
Well, I think it is taken seriously, but at the same time, the Loyalist Community Council said they're not going to get involved in any kind of violence. They issued a statement saying that the component parts of the council, the paramilitary groups, were not involved in organising any of the violence. So I don't think there's any danger that they're going to return to violence or have some sort of orchestrated campaign. What has been happening is very localised. I mean, it hasn't been of a major level of disturbance which damages the community, damages the economy. People in Belfast this morning are out walking their dogs, they're relaxing. There's absolutely nothing else happening on the streets. I mean, as I say, it's mostly young teenagers who are doing it, and there is no evidence that there's anything like a slide back to the sort of trouble that existed 25 years ago. There's no guns were used. There were no senior figures that are involved in paramilitary activities directing anything.
Julie, the hope was basically in 1998 that sectarian violence, hatred would just fade away, and the new era of mutual faith, trust would prevail. That does not seem to be the case because both parties remain entrenched. The two narratives are in conflict with each other. Do you think that this could be an opportunity for the Loyalists and the nationalists to try use that same spirit of 1998 to build bridges once again?
I think that there's always, where there's a will, there's a way. I think one of our biggest problems isn't the agreement, but what's happened in spite of it thereafter. The agreement was intended to share power. It was intended to share responsibility. But the system of governance that we have isn't the sharing of power, it's the splitting of power, where we give one party one portfolio and the other another. So one will look after housing and the other will look after education. There's no shared decision making other than at the executive what they're prepared to bring in and debate and what they're not, as well as the programme for government. So it's not necessarily representative, and it holds things back. I strongly advocate a system of governance similar to our councils that allow each party to form mini voluntary coalitions with each other to progress their manifestos and deliver on the promises that they made to their electorate. But I think that there is a growing feeling that we want change in Northern Ireland, but not to scrap the Good Friday Agreement, but to build on it.
Unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there for the time being. Julie Anchor-Johnston, Donncha O'Bachaun, Brian Finney, thank you very much indeed for your contribution and your insight. Thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website aljazeera.com for further discussion. Go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hashim Ahalbara, and the entire team here in Doha. Bye for now.